Overnight, Israeli forces carried out an operation into the southern portion of the Gaza Strip where they say they surrounded and eliminated at least 50 members of Hamas. Now, this comes alongside the Israeli government saying they are putting together a program where Palestinians can voluntarily relocate from the Gaza Strip, quote, in accordance with the vision of U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, for any of my fellow Americans watching this thinking, not my problem, it's happening over there, think again. Because we just redeployed a aircraft carrier from the Pacific to the Middle East, probably more focused on Iran than anything else. But in the meantime, we're in a hot conflict with the Houthis. More strikes into Yemen just before I hit record today. So let's go ahead and get started. Beginning with ground operations in the Gaza Strip, the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel is off as of a couple days ago. We've seen a significant increase in Israeli airstrikes targeting Hamas leadership, and more on that in a moment. But just in the last couple days, we've started to see footage and documentation of Israeli forces carrying out operations on the ground. They said yesterday they began operating in Beit Hanun in the northern portion of the Gaza Strip. They say the reason for that is to target Hamas's terror infrastructure sites in order to expand the security zone in northern Gaza. Now, something to keep in mind here is everywhere the Israeli forces are going on the ground, they've already been there. So they're moving back into areas previously cleared that we'll see how it works out. In some cases, you have to expect that Hamas moved back in and kind of fortified that area in the last 2 months since Israel moved out. Now, in both of these cases, in the north, central, as well in the south, as Israeli forces are moving in, they are putting out flyers ahead of time asking the civilians to evacuate, and we'll get to more on that here in a second. But we did just get notification that in the last few hours, Israeli forces operated and conducted an encirclement of the Tel al-Sultan area in Rafah. That's the southern portion of the Gaza Strip, and we have some footage of that here. They say the purpose of this activity was to dismantle terror infrastructure sites and eliminate terrorists in the area in order to reinforce control and expand the security zone in southern Gaza. They say during the night, troops encircled the area, eliminated several terrorists, and conducted a targeted raid on terror infrastructure sites that were used over the past few months as command and control center for Hamas. And then in some of the unofficial reporting I'm seeing coming out of Israel right now, they're saying as many as 50 Hamas militants were killed in that specific raid. Now, turning over to the Hamas-affiliated Gaza Ministry of Health for an idea on the casualty figures at this point. They say in the past 24 hours, Gaza Strip hospitals have received 41 people killed and 61 injured. And since March 18th, when this new wave of fighting began, they say that 673 people have been killed, along with 1,233 total wounded. Now, I mentioned there's this opportunity, if you will, for Palestinians to voluntarily leave the Gaza Strip. It hasn't really been in place at all since the war began. I mean, after the October 7th attacks, Israel essentially shut down, locked down the entire strip. Nobody came in or left. It looks like right now there's a program kind of underway to get Palestinians that want to leave, put them in the position to be able to actually exit the strip. Of course, the big question there will be, is this permanent or is it temporary? And it could lead to, folks not leaving because they think that this could be a forced permanent move. But anyways, last night they say Israel's security cabinet approved the suggestion by Defense Minister Katz to establish a new administration in the Defense Ministry tasked with enabling Palestinians to voluntarily leave the Gaza Strip. In a statement, they said that the directorate will work to prepare and enable safe and controlled passage of Gaza residents for their voluntary departure to third countries, including securing their movement, establishing movement routes, checking pedestrians at designated crossings, and then coordinating the provision of infrastructure that will enable passage by land, sea, and air to the destination countries. At this point, there's been some talk about the possibility that this could be maybe Egypt, I think, is one country I've seen thrown out there. Some areas in Africa, possibly, or more northeastern Africa. We'll see. I don't think there's a set place where the Palestinians at this point would be relocated in mass, but it looks like that program is getting some legs. They say that this statement adds the efforts to enable Gazans to migrate from the Strip who want to do so and is being carried out, quote, subject to Israeli and international law and in accordance with the vision of U.S. President Donald Trump. Defense Minister Katz put out a statement saying, quote, we are working with all means to implement the U.S. President's vision, and we will allow any Gaza resident who wants to move to a third state to do so. So this will be something worth keeping an eye on. Again, it's whether or not you think this is a good plan or a bad plan or anything in between. This is something that hasn't been on the table since this war began. So there's certainly going to be people in the Gaza Strip, without a doubt, that want to leave and just get their family out of there and have no intention of coming back. We can't group everybody into these exact same ideological camps. So I would assume that we're going to see some degree of outflow of Palestinians under this program. Of course, pending a receiving country ready to take them in. Now, turning over to some airstrikes, we've seen an uptick in Israeli air action, not just in Gaza, but also in southern Lebanon, hitting Hezbollah targets. Just yesterday, we got news that Salah al-Bardawil, probably mispronouncing that, a senior member of Hamas's political bureau, was killed in an Israeli strike in Khan Yunis. Hamas actually put out a statement confirming this, saying that he was killed in a tent while praying with his wife, and we don't generally get Hamas confirmation of their leaders being killed. So that's something new that we've started to see in recent days. According to Israel, they say Salah is a senior member of Hamas's political bureau and served as a spokesman for the Islamic Jihad organization and a Hamas member of the Palestinian Legislative Council. So really, the biggest change I think we've seen in the last week, really since these airstrikes began again, is immediately Israel began eliminating senior Hamas figures. Like the first strike, we started to hear about some of their top officials being taken out, and that's continuing. So clearly, over the course of the last 60 or so days that this ceasefire was in place, Israel was keeping an eye on the Hamas leadership, and as soon as they had the green light, started taking quite a few of them out. Now, shifting up north to the northern front, which is still not entirely pacified. Just over the last couple days, there's been an uptick in rocket launches coming from previously Hezbollah-controlled territory into Israel. Israel is blaming Hezbollah. Hezbollah, for their part, has denied any involvement in this attack, and they said that Israel's accusations are pretexts for its continued attacks on Lebanon. And they put out an interesting statement saying that Hezbollah stands with the Lebanese state in addressing this dangerous Zionist escalation on Lebanon. Now, the Lebanese armed forces did put out some information talking about how they went down to this area. They found these modified rocket launchers, pretty low budget type stuff, like the kind of thing we would see out of Hamas in Gaza, like relatively homemade. And again, I think it's worth noting at this point that Hezbollah says, this isn't us. And in the past, Hezbollah has been very forthcoming in claiming every single attack they've carried out. So let's wait for more confirmation on that to find out exactly who is responsible for these attacks. By the way, it could be a rogue Hezbollah element or a group that previously fell under Hezbollah and is now not reporting through the organization, but kind of starting their own branch. Anything. There's a wide array of possible actors involved here. Now, in a response to this, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu instructed the IDF to carry out a series of strikes on dozens of terror targets all across Lebanon. And they say that during the course of these strikes, which again happened all across the country, Israel was able to hit Hezbollah command centers, infrastructure, take out some of their leadership figures. We saw some airstrikes on vehicles and motorcycles as these people were moving, rocket launchers, and weapons depots. And some of these had pretty significant secondary explosions. So clearly, still some weapons up there that Israel is able to target. Now, shifting outside of Israel and Lebanon and Gaza for a second, kind of, to the Houthis down in Yemen, still a major actor in all of this. So they just this morning announced that they carried out 2 more missile strikes against Israel. Now, I'm losing track here. I'm losing track of the number of Houthi attacks against Israel, but it's a lot. It's a lot more right now than it has been really at any point in this conflict, I believe. It's not new for the Houthis to fire these ballistic missiles and sometimes drones at Israel from Yemen, but I don't remember any other point in the conflict where it's been every day like we've seen for the last 6 or 7 days now. That's notable. The Houthis also put out a statement saying that they were targeting the Ben Gurion airport in Israel and said that it will remain unusable, as in they're going to continue firing missiles at that airport until, quote, the siege of Gaza, the aggression on Gaza stops and the blockade is lifted. So again, with the Houthi messaging, consistent. We all know exactly what they're going to say, when they're going to stop. Siege of Gaza, blockade, allow aid in. Now, one of those missiles, at least, appears to have either disintegrated over Saudi airspace or maybe even was shot down by the Saudis. It's not entirely clear at this point. But nonetheless, none of those missiles at this point have made it through even to Israeli airspace, let alone impacting inside of Israel, causing any sort of damage or producing any casualties. The United States, however, is carrying out additional airstrikes against the Houthis. We had, again, this is one where I'm losing track. I'm not sure the number actually matters at this point. It's probably like the 5th or 6th consecutive day. More footage coming out of the Red Sea. We've got aircraft taking off from the USS Harry S. Truman, and then there were probably some other ground-based assets used as well from the region. It's not clear what the battle damage is inside of Yemen at this point. There's some unfounded rumors, I'll say, or unverified rumors is probably a better way to put it, that some senior Houthi officials have been killed in these U.S. strikes. Haven't seen anything to back that up. It was like a news snippet, and that was it. And even the news snippet didn't even pretend like this is based on anonymous sources. The information just appeared. So we'll wait to gather more information on that front. But we did get a statement. If you recall, on the 17th, U.S. President Trump said, hey, Houthis are going to stop because the Houthis know that everything that they do, we view as coming from Iran. So the next round fired by the Houthis, we're going to view as a direct shot from Iran. That didn't really deter the Houthis at all. In fact, since that statement was put out, it looks like they've carried out attacks against the United States, against our ships in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden every day. Just before hitting record, they announced again that they said an hours-long engagement with the Truman and other associated warships in the Red Sea, drones and missiles. Nothing from the United States on that front. So there's a couple considerations. One, of course, that it didn't happen, although I will say the Houthis have been pretty reliable in claiming that these attacks take place. They're not very reliable in the outcome of the attacks. Anybody following this knows that U.S. aircraft carriers are sunk 74 times in the last 2 years, which was a problem until they all managed to arrive back home in the United States safe and not sunk. But in terms of announcing that they actually fired missiles and drones, the Houthis have been relatively consistent, relatively reliable, if we can say that. But at this point, no confirmation from the United States. Now, Trump did put out a statement on the 19th saying, quote, reports are coming in that while Iran has lessened its intensity on military equipment and general support to the Houthis, they are still sending large levels of supplies. Iran must stop the sending of these supplies immediately. Let the Houthis fight it out themselves. Either way, they lose, but this way, they lose quickly. Tremendous damage has been inflicted upon the Houthi barbarians, and watch how it will get progressively worse. It's not even a fair fight, never will be. They will be completely annihilated. So clearly a lot of U.S. focus right now is on the Houthis, but also kind of we're striking the Houthis, but looking at Iran. And in line with all of that, Ian Ellis reported just the other day that the USS Carl Vinson carrier strike group is now being redeployed from the Pacific theater over to the Middle East. He said that it should arrive there sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks. That's just how long it takes for it to transit that location. He added that the Truman carrier strike group is being extended, which means that there's probably going to be a bit of an overlap where we're going to have 2 U.S. Navy carrier strike groups in the Middle East at the same time. That's a lot of firepower. We did this for periods of time right after the October 7th attacks as a way to try to deter the Houthis and Hezbollah and Iran from really escalating the conflict beyond what it already was. I think this might be the first time since then. We may have had some overlap at other points during the fight with the Houthis, but either way, we are about to have 2 carrier strike groups in the Middle East. There's also a third right now. I believe it's the Nimitz that is wrapping up some training, and there's speculation that it could possibly be added to this Middle East grouping as well if things continue to spiral in the way that they are. So again, we've got an increase in U.S. troop deployments to the Middle East as strikes are intensifying, not just between Israel and Hamas, but Israel and Hezbollah and the Houthis and Israel and the U.S. and the Houthis. We'll see. Hopefully I think it's still very much at a point where we can get a lid on this thing and it doesn't have to spiral anymore. But for the time being, it does look like the United States is at least moving the necessary assets into place in case this goes the next step and maybe escalates into a broader conflict with Iran. But that's all I've got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.